Did you know that you can use Azure Policy to enforce governance within your Kubernetes cluster? Let's see that in action. So this will be done in two parts. One will be applying a policy in Azure Policy, configuring and applying it. So basically called policy assignment to a scope. In this case, we'll be applying it to our subscription, and then we'll go ahead and configure our Kubernetes cluster to use that policy and enforce those rules on our cluster. So right now I'm in the policy page on Azure portal. On the left hand side, this is pretty much zoomed in, so my menu is popping up like this, but it would be probably a menu in the on the left hand side. um, you would see definitions. These are all the built-in definitions. It would be marked built-in. There may be custom that you have, um, uh, your organization or you might have built, but we'll look at one built-in policy. um, I'm gonna filter by CPU, like that CPU. So one policy should pop up. Yeah. So Kubernetes cluster, this one, Kubernetes cluster container CPU. If I click on it and open it, it's like Kubernetes cluster container CPU and memory resource limit should not exceed the specified limits. So let's look at the policy definition. So you have properties like display name. This is the display name, and there are some parameters. Okay, we would not look at all of them, but few of them. First is the effect. So by effect, like what would it do? It can do few of these things, like it can do audit or deny, or it can be disabled. The default value is deny, so the policy's enforcement is to deny the action if it does not match or does not is not compatible with the policy or goes against the policy. And then there are a bunch of others, like you can exclude some namespaces. You can apply it on specific namespaces. By default, I think some of the namespaces are excluded, like cube system, gatekeeper system, Azure Arc, Azure extension usage system. They are all excluded. You can select do labor selector, like it doesn't, so that doesn't apply to all the deployments. uh, but two other parameters that we want to look at is the CPU limit. This would be the maximum CPU units allowed for a container, and memory limit. So the maximum memory limit allowed for a container. By setting these values, the policy will make sure that no containers are deployed to the cluster whose limits are more than what you configure here in the policy. Let's go ahead and see that in action. So what we have to do is click on assign policy. When we click on assign policy, it takes us to a very familiar wizard, and it's asking for what scope. So we'll choose it to be on a choose a subscription. So I'll choose my own subscription, and we can optionally apply it on the resource group, but that's okay. I'll apply it to the complete subscription. No exclusions, apply it to everything. This is the policy definitions and assignment name. We can just use the same name as the policy is. No need description enforced. Yes. um, in the parameters, the effect would be deny. Max allowed CPU units will go by one CPU. So if you use if you have so if you set up limits to be two CPU units or even 1.1, that this is not going to work. Max allowed memory bytes to be 1 GI. Okay, no image exclusions. Let's go next. No remediations, we don't need to do anything. Review and create, so let's hit on create. and creating policy assignment succeeded. So policy has been assigned to our cluster. So we can go that we can go in the policy on the assignments. Let's go ahead and click on the assignments and search for CPU again, because that's the easiest way. So here's our policy assignment. It has been assigned to our subscription. Now that we have that policy applied to our subscription, let's see how we would use that policy to enforce those rules on our cluster. So if I run az aks list, I would see the only cluster that I have here. I've already pulled the credentials. If you don't know, it's az aks pull credentials, and then you use name of the cluster, and then you use resource group name of the cluster, and I think overwrite existing, pull as aks, is it get credentials? Yeah, so now I have the credentials. If I look at get nodes, yeah, I have one node ready and everything. So let me show you something. So if I do get namespace, I have a cube system namespace here. I do not have any gatekeeper namespace. We'll see what happens when we apply the Azure Policy add-on. Before we apply the Azure Policy add-on, you have to first register the provider. The command to register the provider is az provider register and namespace. That would be Microsoft Policy Insights, and I hope I spelled everything right, which will, yeah. So that provider is already registered in my case. Let's go ahead and enable add-on on our cluster. So az aks enable add-on, and add-ons would be Azure Policy. Again, the name of the cluster, we'll just take it from here, name of the cluster, and the resource group. So like that. This is gonna enable add-ons. I think the command is enable add-ons. Okay, yeah, this is working. This will take a little time, but once you're done, you'll see this output here. This is your cluster object. We have Azure Policy enabled on our cluster. So now that um, Azure Policy is enabled on cluster, if you remember, we looked at the namespace earlier. Now let's go ahead and look at the namespace one more time. So if I do get ns, you would see one additional namespace popped up, Gatekeeper system. And cube system, if I look at the pods in the cube system, then you would see that there are two more pods, Azure Policy pod and Azure Policy webhook pod. There are more deployments in the Gatekeeper. Let's look at that too. So get all in this, and we'll see that there are, one is audit pod, two controller pods, there's a webhook service, and deployments and all that stuff, all that good stuff. So if you don't know what is Gatekeeper, I will link it in the description to the website of the Gatekeeper project. I would encourage that you look at that. We are good to see our policy in action now. So let me show you something. So I have a deployment here, deployment file here, and this deployment file will deploy nginx ingress controller. But if you see, CPU and memory limits are 2. So if you see this, so as per our policy, no containers with limits greater than 1 CPU and 1 gig of memory should be allowed on the cluster, but we would try to do a deployment with 2 CPUs and 2 gig of memory as the limits, and we'll see what happens. So it's a k apply hyphen f, and that's the deployment.yaml. I'm going to apply it. We'll see what happens. So you see all these deployments of ingress controller got deployed. But if I run k get pods, no pods in the default namespace. If I get all resources in default namespace, I'll see that the deployment went through. Deployment is there, which needs at least one container to be ready. Right now, nothing is ready. If you look at the replica set, um, the desired number of replicas is 1, but current is 0 and ready is 0. So basically no pods came up, though we want one to come up. So if you look at the events in the replica set, that would be k describe this thing. And if you look at the events, we'll see that there's a failed create event that says error creating because admission webhook validation gatekeeper.sh denied the request because container controller CPU limit is 2 is higher than the maximum allowed of 1. So that's our policy, not letting this deployment go through. So this is how we use Azure policies to enforce rules on the cluster. Let's do one thing. Let's go ahead and update our deploy.yaml and change this to 1 and only 1, and change this to 1. So this is in the allowed limit. Um, let's see how this will work now. So if I do deploy, everything is unchanged other than configured. Okay, deployment got updated, so that should give us a new replica set. Yeah, new replica set came up, desired 1 and current 1. The pod came up because the policy allows it now. That's it. That's pretty much it. I hope you like this video.